Nick Smith. Tits watched me with a pout as I took another step back and wiped what I hoped was her sweat off my face. Mummeldobran waited for Tits's explanation for a moment before clearing their throat. The aggressively flirtatious archfey sighed and turned to Mummeldobran. I got bored, so I decided to spy on the enemy, Tits said. I noticed a bunch of crows on their side of the battlefield, so I disguised myself as one and just flew around a bit. The real crows weren't very nice at all. Called me all sorts of names like false wing, decoy, and bitch, but they didn't tell the vampires about me either, so I guess they weren't all that bad. Skip to the part about them turning our kin into vampires, please, Mummeldobran snarled. Patience. I risked my life, you know. Probably. I should be able to tell the story however I want to. The longer you wait, the more of them are turned, right? I don't think so. There's nothing we can do about it at the moment anyway. Even if I waited another hour to tell you, I don't think it would make any sort of Tits, Mummeldobran interrupted with a growl. Tell me what you know. Now. Fine. They're doing a ritual that's taking the captured wilder and forcing them into mortal shells, which turns them into mindless vampires. They just stand there creepily until they're given a task. But how? Mummeldobran's expression went from anger to bewilderment in record time. You can't make a vampire! It's a divine punishment. And how are they able to force the pact? I don't know, but there was definitely some demonic elements to the ritual. Tits crossed her arms, grinning as I looked away from their bulging chest. Very bad vibes. Demonic? Well, that complicates things. I guess that means we have no choice but to go with your suggestion, Nick. The King of Archfey turned to me expectantly, but I was distracted by a sudden awareness of a sickeningly sweet smell. The more I smelled it, the faster my heart seemed to pump. It wasn't long before I realized that my blood was pumping to a very specific location. I glared at Tits, whose grin had grown malicious. You've got to be fucking kidding me, I growled. You absolute CU. I agree that Nick's strategy would definitely be effective at keeping more Wilder from being snatched away, Yulk interrupted. I don't see how it will help with getting the captured Fae away from the vampires, though. Tits began to laugh maniacally as my eyes shot metaphorical daggers at her. Them. Whatever. Anger rose within me like a volcano ready to erupt. Trembling, I tried to calm down by turning my thoughts back to when I last felt like this. It was a few weeks after Cass and I had started officially dating. I'd gone over to her house on the weekend to study for a test on Monday. She was still wearing her pajamas when she answered the door, with a few buttons undone, just low enough to let me see down her shirt without actually seeing anything. Nash said, looking back and forth between Tits and I. We'll want to work our way through the vampires' lines to try to rescue their current captives. The shields will help us keep a good formation to do so. Looks like they're focused in the northeast, so maybe going for their flanks would be a good idea. Nash, Yulk, and Mummeldobran huddled together and muttered to each other over the stump while glancing worriedly at Tits and I. Keeping Cass in my thoughts, I locked eyes with Tits. What is this? I demanded, shifting uncomfortably. Tits stopped laughing and grinned like a shark. I believe you call it perfume. Algebran suggested it. I did no such thing, a voice to my left said. Algebran entered the clearing at a steady pace and approached us. Tits turned to them and pointed accusingly. Yes, you did, they said. You said that humans spray themselves with fragrances that they find pleasant in an attempt to mimic mating pheromones. Pheromones? I shouted, feeling unusually aggressive. Tits bit their lip and raised a brow at me flirtatiously, and I had to take a deep breath to stop myself from drawing my blade. Then, Algebran waved their hand and a calm spread over me, easing the tension that had been working its way through my body. The sweet smell dissipated as Tits glared angrily at my savior. Be at ease, Nick, Algebran said. Tits' pranks come from a place of affection, after all. I'll try to look at it like that, I grumbled. So why did you tell them about pheromones in the first place? Tits has done little more than speak of you since last we met. There were a lot of questions about you and some about humanity in general. I thought I was being careful with my answers, but I'm afraid that wasn't the case. It worked, though, Tits said smugly. Didn't it? You got aroused. By me. You're wrong. I shook my head angrily. If I was aroused, and I'm not saying I was, it was because of the pheromones. And I was thinking about Cass the whole time. You ungrateful little... Tits's snarl cut off as they regained control of themselves. Fine. You're in love, whatever the hell's that is. But she's not here, Nick. You don't have her to comfort you when you're hurt, and I can be that for you. So why not? Am I not Don't bother, Algebron interrupted. You won't like the answers to those questions, and we have far more pressing concerns. Do we not? Tits regained a neutral expression and coldly glanced between myself and Algebron. Fine, they said. Without so much as a backwards glance, Tits strolled over to the rest of the group. I took another deep breath, struggling to cope with the swell of emotions that had just overtaken me. Anger at the deceit and refusal to respect my wishes. Melancholy for the memories of Cass that were unexpectedly brought up. Shame at how my body reacted to something as simple as a smell. Algebron gestured for me to follow them. Once we were far enough away that we could no longer hear the rest of the group, they turned to me. Tits didn't do this out of malice, Algebron unnecessarily explained. It's just how we are. I know, I replied. I remember. And don't be so quick to lump yourself in with her. You don't do things like that. Not to you, no, but that's because I know almost everything about you. Pranks are how we learn about things that think. Why not just talk, though? Talking only works with other wild ones. Everything else can lie without consequence, so long as their deceit remains undiscovered. Algebron sighed softly. We can't. But pranks and the like elicit an honest response more often than not. If we suspect the response is dishonest, we keep pranking until we get an honest one. I nodded, suddenly understanding a lot of the memories that Algebron had inadvertently shared with me. Yulk was right, the Fae are weird. They understand us about as much as we understand them. Less in some cases. I kind of feel bad, though, I said. Getting rejected by someone you love never feels good. Algebron snorted. I wouldn't feel bad if I were you. Tits doesn't love you. We're not capable of that. Not really. She feels infatuation. Desire. She wants you, yes, but not to love. To keep, like a trinket. Maybe even just to use and discard, though I have my doubts about that. You're not capable of feeling love? No. I felt it when I was reliving your life. But it's an alien feeling to me. I've never felt that before, and I never will again. I can't even provide a reasonable explanation for the feeling or why you're able to feel it, and I can't. I can empathize. Some of your memories were of things that I can't do, and I can't really explain how they felt either, I said, staring at the ground for a moment. Is there a way to get Tits to stop? Probably not, Algebron laughed. This is a game to them, and games are our biggest weakness, but they'll learn where the line is. Eventually. I hope so, I sighed. All right, let's rejoin the strategy council or whatever. Algebron nodded, and we walked over to the rest of the group. Mumbledobran raised an eyebrow at me, and I shrugged in response. For a moment, the King of Archfey looked like it wanted to ask me something, but then it decided against it and cleared its throat. Greetings, Algebron, Mumbledobran said. We've come up with what I believe is a sound strategy to counter the enemy. That is good news, Algebron bowed their head. We're going to split our forces into 3 groups and flank the enemy, Nash explained. The goal is to break them and push toward their center where they're keeping the prisoners. The mindless ones won't break, though, Tits sighed. They're being controlled. Yes, and Brood are fiercely competitive, Algebron added. They're unlikely to flee unless they see someone else do it first. So then we keep killing them until we open a hole to grab the prisoners, Mumbledobran shrugged. The others argued back and forth a bit more, but a thought occurred to me and wouldn't go away. The Fae get reborn if they're killed. The only reason the Archfey don't want to kill them is because they'll be punished. So what if? I put my tongue between my molars and bit a little to clear my head. There aren't any spells that I know that would guarantee a quick and painless death. If I could make a nuke spell, that would probably do it. But that would be a very, very bad thing to teach the Fae. Plus, I'm not confident that I wouldn't end up caught in it. Assassination. But how? Mumbledobran asked, pulling my head out of the clouds. I saw the taskmaster of the mindless ones, Tits explained. If he dies, they'll probably stop doing whatever they're doing. Why didn't you kill him in the first place? Because he's near the prisoners. They'd get caught up in my attack, and I assume that you don't want me becoming a vampire, Tits laughed. But I can guide someone who's a little more subtle to his location. Mumbledobran and Tits glanced at me. I resisted the urge to audibly sigh. Ooh, I get it now, Mumbledobran said. Well, it looks like this is what the higher ones wanted when they brought them here. Shit, Nash muttered. This is going to be a hard fight. Indeed, Yulk said. Actually, I think you two should hang back, Algebron said. The 3 of us stared at the Archfey, dumbfounded. Huh? I managed to say. Orcs are vulnerable to being turned, Algebrin explained. Or at the very least, becoming food. Tits and I can take Nick to the enemy's rear, where they're weakest, and guide him around what guards they have. The main attack will serve as a distraction, and Nick will serve as our assassin. And what happens after? Yulk asked. He'll be surrounded by vampires. Well, we know he's fairly capable of withstanding the fair realm, Mamuldobran added. Didn't even throw up. We can use that to get him out. We can also use it to get him into a good location. Why not right where the vampire is? I asked. There's a fairly noticeable maelstrom of energy when the fair realm is breached. If we pop you into their encampment, they'll all notice. That's not a problem for popping you out, though. My stomach twisted. I couldn't really tell if this was because of the thought of using the fair realm or nervousness due to the task at hand. I'll need some time to recover after, I said. Nash's hand appeared on my shoulder. You shouldn't do this, he said. Not without us. I know. But the only thing I can think of that would be worse than telling our mom that you died is telling her that you've become a vampire, I said. If I die, you'll miss me. But if you die, a whole family is torn apart. I see the logic, Yulk nodded. However, I strongly oppose it. We have sworn to protect you as one of our own, Nick. Also, your death will tear our family apart because you are a part of our family. Part of me really didn't want to do this. I'd be lying if I said it was a small part. My last one-on-one fight with a vampire didn't go well, and having Nash and Yulk with me would be very comforting. But Algebrin was right. The more of us there are, the harder it is to be sneaky, and they're vulnerable to being fed on. I'm not. Still vulnerable to being killed, though, but if push comes to shove, I can hopefully rely on 10. They can't. You're right, Yulk. You are both my brothers, and so you know exactly how I feel right now. It will be risky for me to go by myself, but I have 10, which gives me a much better chance of survival, I pointed out. You are both more skilled than I am, but you don't heal as fast, and if you're knocked out, you're done. I am much more likely to lose you than you are to lose me. That's a load of shit, Nash scoffed. 10 can't help you if they lob off your head. That's true, but... Bored now? Tits interrupted, grabbing my shoulder. Let's go. Before I could say anything else, the world went dark again. Cold. So cold. A deep, bitter cold. The kind that digs icy fangs straight into the bones, eagerly consuming any semblance of warmth. I am broken. Still broken. How long has it been since I was last whole? How did I get here? Where is this? Vague pieces of recollection slipped away the moment I tried to focus on them with my addled mind. Nothing solid formed, just brief memories of sights, sounds, and smells. Then it occurred to me. Why can't I see? As I adjusted to my current state, I quickly realized that I could also no longer breathe. Or move, for that matter. The question of whether or not I was still alive was answered by the hammering of my heart. It was all I could hear as well. Panic gripped me, but I could not flail, flinch, or scream. All my efforts did was make me tired. So tired. Then I heard a crack. Was that me? I pushed harder and harder and heard more cracking, but my energy soon gave out. The last thing I remember before sleep took me was the feeling of something wet touching my face. Then, darkness. A screech woke me with a start. Light! Precious light was all I could see, and it warmed my skin. I blinked and rubbed my eyes until they were able to focus again. Then I looked around and found that the screeching was coming from nearby birds. They took to the sky as I stood. Sand covered me in the ground. A massive body of water gently lapped at the sand as I brushed myself off. The ocean, and this must be a beach. The terms jumped into my mind, but I couldn't place where I learned them. As I looked around, trying to figure out what I should do next, I came to a terrifying realization. I don't know anything about who I am, where I am, or why I'm here. All I could tell is that this place felt wrong. This disconcerting feeling of being displaced set me on edge. Fear nipped at me, but I struck it down. There's hope in feeling out of place. If I feel out of place here, that means that there is a place for me elsewhere. All I need to do is find out where that is. I walked inland from the beach and spotted a trail. Again, the term popped into my mind with no recollection of where it came from. But some information came along with it. Trails are formed when things walk in the same area frequently. Perhaps if I follow the trail, I'll find someone who can tell me what happened to me and who I am. Grunting to myself, I cautiously followed the trail. Using the vegetation to the side of it was cover in case I needed to hide. The trail led to a much larger sort of path, a road. Roads are like trails, but for carts and livestock. The sun was beginning to set, and so I chose the direction that kept the sunset at my back. This would reduce my visibility to others and allow me to identify them before they could identify me. Feeling somewhat secure with my decisions thus far, I carried on until I found structures. I was suddenly able to remember some different structures. Grand constructions towering over stuff. Still vague, damn it. These structures were not anywhere near as grand, though. Crafted with loosely placed stone and bound straw, with mud as insulation, with wooden fences closing off the surrounding land. Carefully, I drew close enough to observe the beings which reside in these structures. Tanned, tall, and muscular elves were working within the fences, striking the land with crude tools. Agriculture, the growing of food for herbivorous and omnivorous entities. These elves were unlikely to assist me. The memory of my face eluded me, but the sight of my nude body was more than enough to tell me that I don't look anything like they do. A whisper of memory told me that they were once my enemies as well. What to do? If I were an elf, this would be much easier. I could simply stroll up to them and request their aid. The sudden appearance of a nude elf would likely startle them, but also appeal to their empathy. The longing to be an elf took root in my mind, and I felt a crawling sensation across my skin. I nearly panicked, but it felt natural, normal even. A few moments later, my body looked very similar to the elves that were working on the land, though a little paler. Enthralled by my transformation, I nearly forgot why it took place to begin with. Shaking myself back to reality, I continued to watch the elves and study their habits. They would already consider me strange, more so if I stuck out too much. I watched their movements, their body language when speaking to each other, their laughter, their anger, their reactions to the pain and exhaustion, and the work they were doing. Taking note of these things came naturally to me, as if I had been doing it my entire life. The sun had traveled across the sky by the time I felt I had seen enough. I left the bushes I had been hiding in and began my approach. I walked with a slight limp, putting on a show of being exhausted and injured. When I reached the fence, I held up my arm and gave a weak groan. The elves almost didn't notice, but once one of them spotted me, it pointed me out to the rest. They spoke to each other for a moment, and I collapsed against the fence to give them a sense of urgency. The issue of language occurred to me as they ran to my aid. "Hey, are you all right?" one of them asked. "Oh, good. I have familiarity with the way that they speak." "Help!" I uttered weakly. Then I pretended to faint. "Oh shit," one of the elves said. They rushed to my aid and gently shook me in a fruitless attempt to revive me. "What should we do?" "Get him inside. I'll fetch the elder." Two of the elves lifted me by my armpits and legs. "Heavier than he looks," one of them complained. "Where did he come from?" "I don't know," the other grunted. "We'll ask him once we save him, yeah?" The elves carried me for a while, then deposited me on something soft. Maintaining my deception, I waited for the elves to decide what to do. They discussed my origin amongst themselves, and I selected the one that seemed most likely as my cover story. Before long, I heard the door to what could generously be called a hut open, and several pairs of footsteps shuffled inside. "Here he is, Elder," someone said. "Oh dear, I wonder what happened to the poor thing," a shaky feminine voice said. "Get him some water, please." I next heard the sound of quickened footsteps, then the sloshing of scooped liquid. A moment later, a hand gently gripped the back of my head and lifted it. Water then poured into and over my mouth, and I struggled not to shudder at the vile taste as I drank to keep up appearances. Finally, much to my relief, the flow stopped and my head was released. "He got a good bit of it in him. Now what, Elder?" "We can't do much more before knowing what happened," the Elder said. "So we wait." "What if he's a criminal running from the law?" "Well, keep an eye out for anyone that might be looking for him, dear. If they're a guard, we'll turn him over to them. If it's anyone else, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it." The conversation continued for a bit after that, but I quickly found that I wasn't entirely faking my condition. I was extremely tired and inadvertently fell asleep. When I awoke, I forgot my deception and opened my eyes to see an elderly elven female staring at me. "Hello there," she said. "I'm Elder Imyo. Who are you?" "I don't remember," I instinctively replied. I caught a glimpse of my elf-shaped hand and remembered my goal. Infiltrate the elves and try to figure out how to restore my memories, or at least find out who I am, or what I am. Damn, I had an entire cover story planned out. Probably best to stick with what I know, though. "Do you remember what happened to you?" Imyo asked. As if prompted by the question, brief flashes of fangs, fire, pain, and darkness stirred within the recesses of my mind. I had been trapped, but I know not by what means. "How did I escape?" "No," I said. "All I remember is waking up on the beach and going to find help." Am very weak. That's right. You collapsed just outside of the Hant's field, she nodded solemnly, then smiled. They grow tubers. I see. What's a tuber? The elderly elf raised an eyebrow at the question, but proceeded to explain to the best of her abilities. I had originally intended to pretend that I was attacked, but playing off of my amnesia turned out to be a much better deception. A grain of truth within a lie makes the lie easier to swallow. We spoke at length, until Emio volunteered to allow me to stay in the village. She had already received permission from the Hant family to allow me to stay in their stables. She took me to them, and they greeted me warmly. Then they fed me a rather disgusting meal made entirely of plants, but I followed their lead and pretended to enjoy it. Then, they took me to the stable and showed me a bed of straw that I could sleep in. Once they were asleep, I began to explore my surroundings. I found a rodent of sorts gnawing on a leaf in the fields, and instinctively grabbed it, snapping its neck. Its life poured into me, and I felt a portion of my strength return. A hunger that I hadn't been aware of was sated, and I was left holding the corpse of the rodent. With barely a thought, I threw it toward the tree line where it would be unlikely to be discovered. Satisfied, I went back to the stable and meditated on the bed of straw until morning. In the morning, the elves came for me. They interrogated me about my well-being, then asked if I would like to work. Feeling much stronger than the day before, and wanting to bolster their opinion of me, I agreed to assist with the fields. And thus began a routine. I would work the fields with the elves during the day and stalk for prey at night, taking care to dispose of the corpses accordingly. I learned several things about the elves during this time. Goti Hant, the owner of the farm, was concerned for his daughters. They didn't seem to want to pursue mates or lives of their own, instead concerning themselves with what he considered to be minutiae. He took a liking to me almost immediately, treating me as a confidant and friend. A fool above all, Livti Hant, the matriarch of the family, had been an adventurer of some renown before settling down with Goti, whom she had saved from a pack of beasts. Her main concern revolved around their son, Plero, who was by all accounts as dumb as the tools he wielded in the fields. I was able to easily confirm this to be the case. The daughters, Yra and Aura, were twins and very close to each other. They enjoyed experimenting with different breeds of plants, and were very eager to speak at length on their various discoveries. All quite boring, of course, but it was easy to get caught up in their excitement. If anything, it stirred my hunger. The sun rose and fell several times, and each time it did, I learned more about the elves but very little about myself. Thankfully, consuming life only served to bolster my strength and was not a requirement for my continued survival. Still, it felt good, and as such, I left a miniature graveyard of small animals in my wake. I was, of course, careful to dispose of them outside of the village where predators could take care of them. This continued for many days, until one day I saw something very strange. A trader had come to the village, but its elven features were as fake as my own. It also looked strikingly similar to my true form, but smaller, weaker. A strange instinct told me that it was less than I, a peon to be used as I saw fit. It appeared to have difficulty looking away from me, and I assumed that it could see my true form as well. Once it concluded its business, it set up a camp on the edge of the village. When night fell, I snuck out of the stable and sought the creature out at its camp. "You shouldn't still be on this plane. How did you get here?" it asked as I approached. "I do not know," I replied, taking a seat by the fire. "I can't remember anything." "Really? Damn. I'm Thalomus the Immolator, named as such because of my skill with the various forms of fire and fire-related activities." Thalomus grinned wickedly, and the flames surged as if to prove his point. "Perhaps I can help you." "I suspect that you can, but why would you? You are a valuable asset to the kings. If I help you, I'll be rewarded. Plus, once you've recovered, you might view me favorably." "The kings? Who are they? Why am I valuable to them?" "The rulers of the hells. You're valuable to them because of your ability to shift and morph your body at will. My own disguise is a simple glamour, easily dispelled if one knows how. But you've actually changed your physical form. If it weren't for your aura, I wouldn't have recognized you at all. I can see how that would be useful. Was I a spy?" "You really have lost your memories." No, not a lowly spy like myself. Such a task would be wasted on one such as you. You, my lord, can change your physical form. Everything about it. You're able to make your muscles stronger than they should be. You're able to shape yourself so that you can move faster than anyone else. You can even fly, completely unassisted by magic. To top it off, your command of your body doesn't end with dismemberment. Your dismembered limbs heed your call as well, and you heal much faster than most. Thalomas chuckled and shook his head. You're practically invincible. Then why am I not a king? I asked with a laugh. Because the kings are stronger than you. They're so powerful that they can't even make it through the gates. Can't fit. As such, they're able to instantly annihilate you. But you were known for having potential. One day you might be strong enough to challenge them. Thalomas went on to explain that we are demons, and he is here as an advanced scout in preparation for an invasion. Soon we will try to once again take these lands as our own. All the lives we can eat, which was certainly a tempting proposition given my current diet of small animals. But I wasn't able to give my entire focus to this dream quite yet. There was still one burning question that had not been answered. Who am I? I asked once there was a lull in the explanation. What is my name? Oh, right. Apologies. Thalamus looked flustered. I should have said right away. We stared at each other for a moment. Then he cleared his throat and smiled. You are Lord Hirgaris the Decimator, so called because of your ability to kill anyone who stands against you and leave entire lands barren of life. His smile turned into a grin as he bowed. Welcome back, sire. It took a moment to process this information. I'm a high-ranking demon, one that is nearly invincible. What exactly a demon is still eludes me, though. Something I'll likely relearn in time, I'm sure. Come with me, sire, Thalamus said. We have much to do.